Well, it took a lot longer than I planned, but welcome to the Cities Skylines Beginner's Guide to the User Interface. I'm BonBonB, and you're very, very welcome.
Come here now, girl.
Hello, and welcome to Cities Skylines, the Beginner's Guide, with me, BonBonB. Now, today's episode is all about the user interface. I thought we'd start off with that before we even do any building at all within the game, because when you first get a game like Cities Skylines, a strategy or a simulation game, there's a lot of things on the screen, and it's not always immediately apparent what they do. So today I'm going to quickly fly you through all of the things that you can click and interact with, the buttons and the cogs and the whistles. We're going to start off in the top right hand corner with this cog. It's the pause menu, and when you click onto the pause menu, obviously the game stops running. Pretty good if you want to not watch your city go into disaster while you go and have yourself a cup of tea or a beer or anything else, any other beverages. Any beverage you like. I'm not fussy. Right, the first one is resume game. When you click resume game, you return back to where you were, which is kind of pointless for us today. So second option down, save game. When you click save game, this box turns up, and this box automatically gives you a name for a save game. Here it says new save. You can delete and retype anything you like into here. Like we're going to call this one ZZZZZZZZ. Very good name for a save, I think. But I highly recommend when you're doing your save games to add a number. Your first save, you will call it ZZZZZZ1. And then the next save, you will call it ZZZZZZ2, and so forth. If you do happen to suffer a catastrophic failure of one of your saves, then you can always drop back to the last highest numbered save that you can recall upon. Clicking or unclicking the Steam Cloud will back up your save to the Steam Cloud, so if you do have a complete disaster with your hard drive, you can recall your save from there. Seems like a good idea to me. We'll cancel out of that option. Next one down, load game. Well, that's pretty obvious. Last modified, population or name of the save are the ways of searching for your save game. When you do this, we'll click on have an Assetville. There we are, Assetville. You can even choose a different custom theme if you wish. We won't go into themes now, and we'll leave this as none, but you'll be able to change your theme in that particular menu. Next option down is the options. We'll skip that one and we'll go straight on to statistics and go back to options last. City statistics, this will give you graphs of, well, all of these items down the side here. There's not really much for me to tell you there. You keep an eye on your taxation levels, your influx of people, your birth rates and your death rates, and so forth. Just by clicking, by checking and unchecking your statistics. Quite handy to see how your city is growing. Clicking options brings up all of this. This is where it looks really complicated. It's not that complicated. We'll start off in the gameplay menu just because that's where it's dropped us. You can choose any one of a number of language settings. I'm going to stick to English because all of my other languages are non-existent. Control settings, edge scrolling enabled. Now this is down to preference, I'd suggest. Let me uncheck that and come out of this menu. Now if I move my mouse to the edge of the screen, you'll notice that the map does not move. The only way I can move the map is using the keyboard controls, WASD. If we go back into the menu here, options, gameplay, enable edge scrolling, close that. When I move the mouse to the edge of the screen, it moves. I move up, it moves forward, I move down, it moves backwards. It's one of those things that if you like it or you really don't, and that is how you disable and enable the edge scrolling. You've got a slider there to move the sensitivity of the scrolling up and down, and there's also a camera rotation sensitivity slider as well. Next one down, invert Y mouse axis. Now, what's the Y mouse axis? Well, those of you who do flight simulation games will fully understand this. When you move a joystick forward and you're flying a plane or a spaceship, does the nose of your spaceship go up or down. And depending on your preference, pushing the joystick down would have your nose diving. But there are some games where you want, by pushing the joystick up, you want the camera to go up. So there's your options. Inverting the Y mouse axis, if you feel really uncomfortable with that the game is already set up, you can just switch that over. The next settings are in-game settings. You've got the pop-up guides. Now, if you're brand new to the game and you want tips and advice, click that, and that will give you tips and advice as you're going along. Once you've learnt the game and you don't want to see these tips anymore, just uncheck that and the annoying little pop-ups will disappear. Next one down, auto open chirper messages. What is chirper? Boom, this guy up here. We'll have a look at him in a minute, but he's basically Twitter. He's how your Sims talk to you within the game, and they send you messages via chirper. Right, so if we go into options, auto open the messages, that means every message that is sent to you will automatically open, and to be honest with you, they can get a bit annoying. So you can have that switched on or switched off down to your preference. Possibly when you first get the game you want them switched on just to get a feel for what your citizens are doing, but really in the game as a whole you don't need them. Now you've got the auto saves. Auto save every X minutes in the actual game, and auto save every X minutes in the editors if you're using the editor. It's an idea to have it regularly auto saving just in case of a catastrophic failure. It can be annoying though when it auto saves and you're trying to do something and the game hangs for a few moments. If that's the case, then you can set it obviously to a less frequent save. That's completely up to you. Use day-night cycle. What does that mean? Well, if you check that and switch that little light on, then your world will go through a day and night, and you'll have the lights come on at night and the lights go off in the day, and the moon will come up, then the sun will come up, and you get all of that. Building at night is a little bit more awkward. You do have a little light under your cursor, which is here the mouse light intensity. I can't seem to speak today, I'm sorry. You can switch that up or down so you can see better when working at night. Personally, I prefer to build at day and maybe do screenshots at night. So you can switch that on and off there. Dynamic weather. Well, the game does rain and snow and things, and you can switch that on and off. Personally, I like building in the daylight while it's not raining. But once again, if you're doing screenshots, you might want to have the dynamic weather on, or maybe you just don't care. Road names are a new aspect to the game, fairly recent addition, and the game automatically names the roads as you put them down, and you can change them completely at your discretion. And if you check that, that will display the roads name, the names on the roads, and if you uncheck it, it will remove the names from the roads. Finally, hide far away notification icons. Now, these are little things that hover over your town, your buildings when you've got problems, like an abandoned building. It'll highlight with a little icon saying that this building is abandoned. Well, do you really want to see a million of these things hovering over your buildings from a distance? Well, maybe, maybe not. But you have the option to hide the far away notification icons, make your town look a little bit nicer. Next, we'll have a look at graphics. Graphics are there. Now, the display settings at the top, you have your widescreen, or you can have normal, or you can have widescreen 16:10, depending on your personal preferences, of course. Resolution, I'm set at 160 by 900, and once again, depending on how your preferences and the power of your monitor and all that kind of stuff, you can choose your resolutions from here. Display mode, you have windowed and you have full screen. Once again, I play with windowed because I'm often recording my screen and like to be doing other things as well, but some of you will want to play full screen without the distractions. Finally, Vsync. That is the vertical sync, sorry, not virtual sync. That's your vertical sync. That is, your options for that are don't sync, sync every blank, or sync every second blank. What is Vsync? Cut the long story down very, very shortly. The game refreshes your screen, your picture, every, let's really be no, every 0.1 of a second. Much more rapid than that, obviously. But let's say it's every 0.1 of a second. And then your monitor refreshes, let's say every 0.15 of a second. They're obviously not exactly aligned, and so they can become out of sync. So what happens with the Vsync is it will align your monitor with your gameplay. So you'll probably want to have that all synced up one way or another. Completely down to you, of course. Once you've done that, you hit apply, and that will apply your new settings just from this top section. The next sections down here, these bottom two sections, you don't need to hit apply. These are automatically applied for you as you choose. Now, the first option is Color Correction Override, CCO. This is often known as the LUT, the Lookup Table, and this changes the look of your town, or your city build even. I've chosen the photorealistic LUT by Reaper. That's a personal preference of mine, and this gives me this look here. Okay, you with me? I'm going to go back into that. So I've got the edge scrolling switched on. I should switch that off really. Okay, so back into options, and I'm going to change that LUT to choose something completely different. How about Owl's 60s? And if we come out of there, we've got this 1960s black and white feel to the map. A lot of these LUTs are downloaded, in fact most of them are downloaded off of the workshop, and we'll talk more about workshop items later on. Let's have another look at one of the Owls. Cinematics, Owl Cinematic version 1 is like this, a lot more bold. And so you can change your LUT through the color correction override option here. I'm just going to switch it back to my preferred, if I can find it again. There is no quick way of searching for these guys, you just have to scroll until you find it. There we are. Now, so we're back to my preferred LUT. Next up is depth of field type, and you've got a choice between disabled, legacy, normal and high. Now depth of field, we won't go into all of these. These are fairly obviously. Disabled means you have no depth of field, and the high means you have a strong depth of field, and so forth. And you've got an amount here. Well, I'm going to leave it on normal, and I'm going to show you the difference between none and a lot. Okay, we'll start off with none. If I come out of here, and we'll have a look at here. If you look into the distance, well, it's pretty sharp, isn't it? Pretty sharp. But now, let's go and switch the depth of field up to maximum. And we come out of here. If you look up there, see the camera goes out of focus the further you go away. Once again, depending on how you want to view the game, once again, for cinematics, having the depth of field somewhere between those two will probably be, say, about here maybe. Come back out of that. You can see it goes out of focus the further you get away. I like to have it switched completely off. That's just a personal thing. Film grain amount, that is fairly self-explanatory. You won't be able to see too much of a difference by me moving this around, but obviously that adds film grain to your screen and removes it depending on how you slide it up and down. It won't show too clearly in the on the screen as we're looking at it now. Then the quality settings. Now these will depend on how powerful a processor you're running with and how much RAM you're working with. Obviously the more powerful your processor, the higher you want these settings. You've got shadows quality, disabled all the way up to high. Texture quality from low to high. Level of detailed from low to very high. Shadows distance, very short or very far. The anisotropic filtering. Now this one is quite difficult to explain, but let's just say that the more distant your textures get, the better filtered they will appear. And if you've got a lot of power, then I would suggest I would definitely go with enabled. Even if you haven't got a lot of power, having enabled will definitely help you a lot there. And finally, anti-aliasing, and this is a little thing that removes jagged edges from your game, because a lot of the game is actually drawn with straight lines to make it look like a bend in a road, etc. And well, let's just say that anti-aliasing takes out the jaggedness of these lines. You can have it enabled or disabled once again depending on the power of your processor. Key mapping, well, that is basically what buttons you press on your keyboard, and you can change them. Just click on the one you want to change, type in your new key, hopefully it won't be taken already, and boom, you're away. Simple as that. The option at the top for category is shared, and then you've got in-game, and then you've got the editors. So you can actually set different settings for the editors as from in-game, although I'm not entirely sure why you'd want to do that. Audio is next, and we've got all these different sliders to get things set how you like. Main volume is everything from 100%, which is loud, to 0, which is completely silent, and that affects all of these as well, obviously. The music radio volume, because there is an in-game radio, I'm sure you're aware of that. The ambient volume, which is birds whistling, wind blowing, all those things. The effects volume, when you're using something like the Bulldozer. The user interface volume, which is when you click something and it makes a click sound. And chirper volume, which is that little guy at the top. That's the little noise that he makes, and you can up and down each of these individually to find something that you particularly like. Please note with the radio, if you are planning to do some live streaming and YouTube recording, well, some of the radio stations are not available for streaming just because of things like licensing and copyright and that kind of thing. Gold FM is definitely not available for streaming. Right. Finally, Miscellaneous from this top section, and this is all the resets, resetting the buildings, the key mapping if you've messed up, and the configurations. You can also log in or out of your Paradox account if you happen to have one. I don't. I don't know why not. Below that you have the mods settings. Now mods are little additions to the program, to the game, that you can download off of the workshop, made by independent producers, people like me if I knew how to code. And these add various aspects to the game, things that you may or may not like. I've got a few enabled for this particular demonstration. I normally use a lot more than this. And what you would do to do something with a mod is you just click on the mod you want to play about with. Let's have a look at the remove decoration sprites there. And hit remove grass decorations. I've got that highlighted because I don't like these decoration sprites. Am I going to uncheck that? Come in and have a look at the grass now. You can see we've got all these little decorative sprites making, well, a change to the grass. But I'm using a fairly nice theme underneath here. And if I remove these decoration sprites by highlighting that there, automatic takes them away. And I've got a nice grassy texture anyway, so I don't really need them. But they're there if you like them, if you want them. That's just one of many mods. So you would interact with the mods in-game by clicking down here and making the adjustments that you need. And that's it for the options. That took a while, I'm sorry about that. Let's go on to the next one across. These are your radio stations. Here we've got the official Mars radio station, and you can switch it on and switch it off, and you can close that down. That's about it. You can actually move these buttons around, some of them anyway, not that particular one. If you don't like them, they're in the way. Let's move across to Chirper. Yeah, everybody's favourite little bird. If you click on that, this is the equivalent of Twitter, and these messages come up and you can read them, and then you can close it down by clicking on Chirper again. We open him up, there is a little settings button over here which enables you to change the look of your chirper. If you prefer one with a crown, or this one, or basically well, anything that you wish to download or is offered to you. I'm going to leave him up there like that, but personally I will be removing him from my game using a mod as soon as I can. I'm leaving him there just for the purpose of this demonstration. Top left hand corner, the info views. This we can fly over fairly quickly. I'm not going to go into any great detail at all here, just because there's a lot of information going on here and we're just doing a fly through. But info views will tell you about the electricity situation in your city. If I pull up a little bit, there we are. Then the water, which will show you the arrows for the water. course, remember, if you're putting down water pumping, make sure you put it upstream from your sewage, because you'll be pumping sewage to your Sims, and they don't like that, and they get very sick very quickly. Also tells you the availability of your water and your sewage as well, whether you need to put in more facilities. Also does the same with the electricity, tells you how much you're using and how much you're producing. Also down here whether power plants are active or decommissioned, etc. You've also got same for garbage, for education, for happiness. Happiness is affected by a number of things like parks, land value, all those kind of things. We'll go into that into a lot more detail in a later show. Health, well, that pretty much is well covered. And death care as well, telling you how much room you've got in your cemeteries and whether or not your crematoriums are available. Levels, these are building levels. When you put down the building at first, it will start at level 1, and then as you provide the services for it and fire stations and all those kind of things, and near parks, and you've got the idea. They'll level up to a maximum level of 5 for residential or 3 for any of the 3 business zones. Next is the wind. The darker the colour, the stronger the wind in that area. Once again, particularly useful if you're using wind turbines, and you'll need to place your wind turbines carefully, of course. We've got traffic. The darker the red, the more traffic there is on that road. You can see here we've got dark red on the highways, but completely green on the off-ramps because they're not being used. It doesn't mean if a road is completely dark red that there is too much traffic. It just means that there is a lot of traffic. You can tell if there's too much traffic because things will slow down and make a visual connection with the problem. Pollution. Well, that's your ground pollution and your drinking water pollution, and your legend there. Yes, it's fairly obvious what's going on with that as well. Next one is noise pollution. Once again, anything that produces noise will become red. You can try and filter some of this out with trees. Trees are fairly good at removing noise pollution. It's good. Then we've got the fire safety. Anything that burns will go red, and then your fire stations will be highlighted as well, and the coverage that they are doing will show on the roads in green. Then we've got the same with the crime, with the police stations and so forth. Transport. Now there's a lot of detail behind the scenes on this, including the lines overview. We won't go into any more detail on this today, but a quick way of seeing anything to do with transport is via that button. Next up is population. That's fairly self-explanatory. It tells you your population, how many people are working, what your job availability is and your unemployment rates, plus the breakdown of children up to senior citizens, how many people are being born and how many people are dying each week. Also whether houses are mostly families, mostly seniors, or mostly adults. Next up, we have the outside connections. We won't go into too much detail on this right now, but it will tell you about your imports, your exports, and your tourism as well. Then we have land value. Anywhere which is like a green is a high land value. So if you were to put down a park down here, this would increase the value of this land by the river. Of course, everybody wants to be down by the river. High land value will equate to happiness, because people will be happy they live in a property with high value. Natural resources. Now here we've got bright green down the bottom here, lots of fertile land, so we could do farming here. But if we look over there, we've got some forests going on over there, and you can see that the ground underneath those trees has gone dark green, indicating there is forestry going on. And then obviously you've got oil and ore are 2 other options as well. Districts. Districts at the moment, we've got no districts set up, and we'll go into more detail about districts a bit later on in today's show. Leisure. Well, yeah, what can I tell you about leisure? We'll get onto that in a later show, I'm sure. Finally, terrain heights. Very useful for planning where you want to do building your estates. These lines of topography here, what I would call contour lines, show you obviously the increase and decrease in height of the land. This is a fairly flat piece of land here, and probably very good for building our first little estate. And finally, the traffic routes. which will be able to click on the roads and the traffic, and it will show you where traffic is coming from, going to, and so forth. You've got an option to switch on and off the traffic lights and stop signs, and you can also adjust roads as well. We'll go into that in a lot more detail in a later show, but for now we're just covering what the buttons do. Next we're going to go right to the bottom of the screen. Down here we have got the clock with the date on it, and we are already into July. If you hit that little button down there, it will pause the clock. You can build stuff, you can delete roads and whatever, and nothing will be affected until you unpause it. You can also pause and unpause the game depending on your key configurations, but the default is the spacebar. I'm going to hit the spacebar now with a big clunk, like that, and you can see everything's moving again. I'm going to pause it again with the spacebar, but of course you can do this with this button too. On the right hand side of the date there, you have this button that increases the acceleration of the time, and if I go in, start things off again with the spacebar and click that once, things will move faster, and click it twice, things will move faster still. And if you're waiting for an area to build up and to grow, having accelerated time is a handy thing, but going back to speed 1 is better for keeping control of things. Pause the game again. Next one across, we've got this I button. It's city information. Now there are other ways of looking up most of this information, but it's just, yeah, your city information. You can access your policies, but we will get onto the policies in a minute. We won't go into any great detail. I wouldn't access policies through the city information button, but there is that option. Then you've got the name of the city, which is what you name when you first start the game up, and heaven help you if you give it the wrong name. Decide to change your mind a bit later on. The demand meter, these 3 bars, the first one tells you that our city currently is demanding lots of residential. People want to move in, they don't care about shopping or industrial right now. The other 2 bars are for commercial and for industrial and offices, and those bars are a good way of pointing in the right direction what sort of things to be building next. You may want to build industrial, but your city may not require any, and why build any then? Next we get to the money bar. This is your bank balance. Now I've got it set to unlimited funds, so there's nothing showing here, but your game will say that you are £5,000 in debt or £3 million in the black. The more money you've got, the more things you can do, the more things you can spend money on. The red number at the end here is your weekly income, whether it's going up or whether it's going down. So you want to keep an eye on this bar at the bottom when you're building, because you don't want to run out of money, especially if you're playing vanilla rules, which is how the game is supposed to be played, and you are just starting out, because you can run out of money very, very quickly. Then you've got the population over here, which is the amount of people that are living in your city. Currently for us it's 0, and this is the population change over the course of a week. At the moment it's 0, obviously 0, followed up by this little globally happy guy here. We are very unhappy because we have nowhere to live, so people are not happy. That's why I've got a sad face. Finally, this little button over here will remove the user interface. Very nice for flying across, having a look at your city without those buttons getting in the way. To go back to where you were before, hit the escape button, and there's your interface back. Right, finally we're going to have a look at this bar down here. This is your busy bar. This is where you're going to be doing most of your work and your clicking. Start off with this globe at the end. This is areas, it says there. If we click that, we get an overview of the entire map that we've unlocked. We've only unlocked this particular map, this particular section. We can click on one of these little boxes here and we'll be able to buy into these areas. We won't be doing that today, we're just looking at the interface. But yes, clicking that has opened up this and we get an overhead view of what's going on. If we now go into the info view and click on natural resources, we'll get a overview of like these areas like the wind from above, which is pretty smart. Right, let's come out of that position. Next one is the milestones, and I'm playing with the milestones unlocked, so that's no good here. But if you if you're playing with them locked, then you'll be able to interact with them at this point here. We move across here. What's this question mark? Well, that's the advisor. If you click on that, you get some tips popping up. And here, build roads and zone next to them. Well, duh, of course. I knew I was forgetting to do something. Let's close that box down. But different tips will appear as the game progresses. Next up, roads. Clicking on that will bring up a whole load of roads that you can build and lay down. We're not actually going to do anything like that today. But you've got everything from tiny roads through small, medium, large, and then larger roads, and then the highways, and then intersections, and bus lane routes, and paths as well, pedestrian roads as well. Okay, well, we're not doing any of that today. But actually, we should, just for the sake of zoning, put down the 1. Next up is zoning. Now, we're going to have a look at this bit of road here. There are 6 different sorts of zone that you can do. Low density residential, high density residential, low commercial, high commercial, depending on how big buildings you want. And then you've got industrial, office, and D-zone. So what we're going to do here, just for fun, we're going to use the fill button on that side of the road. Left click zones that area in. And on this side of the road, I'm going to go low density commercial, even though we've got no demand for it. You can draw things with the marquee selection like this. And then if I go to offices maybe, or you can paint it in using a small brush like that, or go on for a large brush and paint it in like this. Does that make sense to you? I'm glad. To D-zone an area, click the D-zone, we'll do the fill button there, that's areas D-zoned, or alternatively you can just right click and paint over with the right click, and that's how you do all that. Okay, next up is districts. Click on districts. Now we've got 2 tabs on districts. The first one, which we'll go to a smaller bubble there to paint with. Select that and then just paint over there, and that is going to become our first district. And it's going to automatically name the district. Well, we'll worry about that in a minute. The other option is erase district, and once again you can left paint over using that, or if you're in the first option, which is paint district, right clicking over that will also unpaint. So there we are. Right, that's that. Next though, you've got the industrial specializations button. Now if you remember, this was like farming type area around here, wasn't it? We've got the options for forestry, for farming, or oil, or general. So we're going to choose the farming industry, and then hovering over the orchard district, and we're going to left click here. It adds a little tractor there, which now tells us that any industrial that we zone into this area will be farming, which is quite neat. We don't want that. We want to go generic, so we're going to change that to generic. Oh no, I changed my mind. I want to do oil. There, we changed it to oil. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense to you. I'm going to go back to generic, and if you want to change the name of the actual zone, just right click on the word. Once you've come out of the district, right click on the name, and then up here type in your new name for the district. That's catchy, but I didn't press enter, so it didn't stick. But that's fine because we're getting rid of that district anyway. I think it's a little bit untidy for my particular liking, so we'll just get rid of it. Good. Right, other options then. You've got the electricity, which brings up all your electricity power. You've got your water, which brings up your water options. And you've got your garbage, which will give you things like landfill and incinerators. And you've got your health, which includes your death care. You've got your fire departments and your police departments and your schools and colleges. Transport. Now, very quickly covering over transport. You've got your everything to do with buses, which includes your bus stations and your bus routes and your bus lanes and all that kind of stuff. Then you've got your metro, which is your underground station. Pop that down there. and then connect it up with tunnels, because that will unlock the tunnels like that. So there we are. But we're not doing with any of those. Get rid of all that. Gone. Out of the way. Next up, we have the train, which is the options between passenger and freight services. Once you put down a station, you'll unlock the rail, and you'll be able to start your train services. Next up, you have, once again, the same with your shipping. You've got passenger and you have got freight for shipping, and it finishes with your airport. But you need to build it on a completely flat bit of land, and well, we already checked the terrain, and the terrain isn't quite flat enough for an airport here, so we can forget about that. Parks and plazas. You've got 3 tabs for here. You've got the parks, you've got the plazas, which are basically, well, concrete parks, I guess. And then at the end, you've got the options, the other parks as well. I've only got a baseball court, but there'll be a lot more available to you once you get onto the workshop and download some stuff. Unique buildings. These are things that you can only place once, and they are in different levels, and quite often you need to unlock these by doing something like putting down the hospital will unlock something for you, and so forth. Once again, I've got everything unlocked using a mod so that you can experience all of these things. And then we'll finish off here by going on to the monuments. These are unlocked as well by basically putting down unique buildings and completing certain tasks within the game. These buildings are quite often, well, crazy. But there we are. And then we go on to the landscaping. Now the landscaping, there is a basic in-game landscaping tool, which I've got a tutorial for already online. And then, as well as being able to landscape the land using these buttons, you can add paths, trees, rocks, and water structures, these being canals and dikes, flood walls and that kind of thing. We're nearly finished, guys. We're nearly there. Clicking on the economy button will bring you up all your taxations, so you can increase or decrease your taxes if you are needing more money, and see how it's being spent across all of these tabs at the bottom. Once again, we'll go into a lot of this in a lot more detail in a later show. The budget is where you're spending your money. For example, when you first put down your coal power station and you're producing way too much electricity, you can actually move the slider up and down at night time or even at daytime individually. Like, we're going to turn the power down at night to 61% just because, but we need more in the daytime because whatever happens to be your reasons, you move these sliders around. Maybe you're producing too much power both times of the day, you move both sliders down, you can save yourself a whole chunk of money. But also, if you need to increase your power but you haven't got enough money to build a new power station, you can move those sliders up and they'll produce more power. It might dig you out of a temporary hole. Finally, if you are completely out of money, click on loans, and you've got 3 options there for loans, and that will hopefully dig you out of a hole. But once again, obviously you're having to pay interest on those, and anybody who's ever paid interest on a loan will know that it's very expensive. Finally, policies. Now, there's a lot going on in policies. We will not cover this in any more than a fleeting glance now, but let's say you want to make some changes, like parks and recreation. Do you want to make your parks and plazas? You can mess things about a bit and go into taxation and increase taxes and decrease taxes and things like that using policies and planning and so forth. There's an awful lot that you can do within the policies. So that's about it, apart from one last thing, the Bulldozer Tool. Click on that, or use the B button as a shortcut, and you can delete anything that you've built, or the game is built for you. So that's about it for today. I don't think there's really much more to say about the user interface. It's taken a little while to cover everything. Hopefully I've answered 1 or 2 questions to you, and I will be coming back and doing a lot more in the beginner's guide just to help you get started on your first city build. It's a really in-depth but fun game, and I'm sure you are going to really enjoy it. I've been BonBonB. Thanks for watching, commenting, liking and subscribing. Don't forget to join me on my channel. Hit subscribe now. I do a lot of tutorials and just I have loads of fun. A lot of fun with Cities Skylines. Be great to have you along. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again very, very soon.